Can you believe that Disney, after they took over Star Wars, would completely shaft George Lucas? Like, oh my gosh, who'd have thought? Can you believe that one? This is one thing that we're saying because as soon as they bought it, basically in the same room where they signed the deal and George Lucas signed over all the rights to Lucasfilm and Star Wars to Disney, they immediately said, all right, boy, you're out. This is stuff that we knew for a long time. And the thing that I'm going to talk about today, okay, so the people have known about it, but there are new details that have emerged. So we're going to talk about yet another thing that George Lucas basically had prepared and ready to go, and it's been completely shelved. Coming to us from Screen Rant. Take that with a grain of salt. I can't believe Lucasfilm is sitting on 60 Star Wars episodes from the George Lucas era, and what he's talking about is Star Wars Underworld. 60 scripts. Now, whether that was a 30-minute show or a 1 hour long show, either way, George Lucas already had those together. He brought in a whole bunch of people. They were in their third draft, basically third draft scripts. That's a big thing right there. That basically means it's just little tinkering from there on out. But he had 60 of them ready to go for a planned 100 script, 100 show series, and it would have been live action as well. And this goes all the way back to 2008, 2012. It's been a matter of record for several years. New details about George Lucas' Star Wars Underworld has recently been revealed. And to that end, many have been wondering if the series will ever become a reality. My thoughts, don't do it. They probably will anyway, because they've pilfered some of it already. We'll see that later on in this article. Now, one of the last projects that Lucas worked on before selling it to Disney in 2012, it was intended to be a major multi-season show, the likes of which had never been seen before on network television, kind of like how Star Wars had never been seen before in the cinemas. Almost like George Lucas is a visionary. Who'd have thunk? However, there are some key reasons why the show never got made. This is just what he's saying. I firmly believe that the time has come for Lucasfilm to finally make Star Wars Underworld a reality. I do not agree with that whatsoever. I am highly on the other side. So according to the reports, it was his big idea and mission in the late 2000s, shortly after getting the animated Clone Wars series off the ground in 2008, and he started work on this because he wanted the story to keep going further and further and further. This actually would have taken place between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, so we would have gotten some context there, and we know Lucas, he would have stayed true to the lore because he created the lore. Wow. He brought several accomplished television writers to Skywalker Ranch. Around 60 third draft scripts were written for this intended series during that time that I just said. Even having people like Lando saying that they would come back. People like Lando, I mean actors like Billy D. Williams, actors like Ian McDiarmid, well, he'll do anything. And Jeremy Bulloch intending to return for the show, which would have been great. They were off the hype and success of the prequels. Everything was going good for Star Wars back in that time. There was still hype everywhere. People loved to see it. The games were doing extremely well. And then Disney took it over. And then everything changed, a market change. Now, don't get me wrong, because just like the expanded universe, that as soon as Disney got it, they decided to decanonize all of that. They still pilfer little bits and pieces from all of it. And some of the elements of the Underworld and 1313 made their way into the canon through arcs of the Clone Wars, because yes, that's what they do. More of the future Star Wars live action shows on Disney Plus, because that's what they do. They take what they want and completely shit all over the rest of it, pretend like it didn't happen. But the only reason why they had that idea, that great idea in the first place, and why it resonates with some fans, at least true fans, is because they know where that stuff comes from. Now, there is something to say about this, because the biggest challenge that got in the way of Underworld being made was the insane cost. They were estimating about $40 million per episode. And looking back at it now in today's world, the Acolyte, you want to talk about this kind of stuff? You want to talk about Rings of Power? How much that costs per episode when they're throwing $1 billion? When the Acolyte was roughly like 100 million per episode. It was something insanely crazy and completely terrible from all walks. Now they do go to reference that the average episode of The Mandalorian costs around 15 million because technology has advanced. But how much technology would they actually need in this kind of thing? And that's one of the things that one of my biggest questions. Now they could have thrown out $40 million just to just see if they could have somebody fund it, and they did go to HBO about it, asking if HBO could fund it because they had the money for it at the time. How much of that would actually have been used, that remains to be seen, and we'll probably never know. There was also unfortunate timing because it seems like there were deals that might be written up with HBO, but while he had a meeting with him, set it up with HBO, the only studio with financial capability, he got caught in a scandal the day before and was let go. So it seems like it was kind of on the table at some point. But that dude was gone. He was probably one of the ones that was behind it. I mean, he obviously was going to give George Lucas the time of day. And to that end, this guy says, I do think the time is much better now for Disney and Lucasfilm to finally make a version of Star Wars Underworld a reality. No, 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 no. Do not do that. Disney should not touch Star Wars with a 10-foot pole. Nobody should touch Disney with a 25-foot pole. And everyone at Disney should climb a 50-foot ladder and just look down. Now, they do go on to say that when looking at the current state of the Star Wars franchise, it's easy to look at Andor as a sign pointing to the potential the Star Wars Underworld could have if it were to be made today. Except people didn't show up for Andor. And now they're throwing almost oh golly, I want to say $1 billion, but I know it's not that. They're throwing so much dadgum money at this Andor season 2, even when Andor season 1 wasn't watched very much. The people who did watch it actually enjoyed it for the most part, but it was a seedy underground thing. The thing with George Lucas's treatment of Star Wars Underworld was that it would have been a direct sequel, basically a fill-in point between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope whenever the Empire is at the height of its power. This would have been a great time to do it. You'd have George Lucas behind it, so he'd make sure that everything was meshing, all the gears were sitting there together. And the fact that they're bringing up Andor really means that they have lost the plot whenever it comes to Star Wars, the Star Wars franchise in general. It's all dead because of exactly what Disney did to George Lucas. He had treatments for the entire sequel trilogy, and they threw it all off in the same room where they signed the documents over. It's like, yeah, I've got a storyline for you. Here, I've got all this thing. This is the three film arc that you could do for the sequel trilogy. It'll be great. They threw it all to the wind and started over with Jar Jar Abrams and Rian Johnson. Look how that turned out. Yeah, you took the hype, all of the great hype that George Lucas had done from the ground up, and completely squandered it. And the fact that there are people still out here that are bemoaning the fact that Disney won't pick it up. They won't go back to George Lucas's stuff. It's like, well, they don't give a shit about George Lucas. They never did. They wanted the money, they wanted the dollar signs, and they wanted their messaging anywhere that they could put it. Funny how nowadays things are starting to come out where like, oh yeah, the Star Wars franchise has lost money since the beginning. That whole $2 billion on Force Awakens, yeah, that was immediately taken away and siphoned out from all the other bullshit that we've been putting out. But don't worry, we're not going to change one little iota of a bit. And that's what's really funny to me after all of this time. George Lucas was always creating and working on Star Wars, his little baby child, and it was good. Obviously, he had flubs. I don't think he's very good at writing dialogue whatsoever, but he's good at imagining things, and the stories came out. I don't care if there were political allegories in the prequels, whatever, take that with a grain of salt. It was never directly on the nose. It was just things that, people could equate to what was going on during the W era. That's fine because you can be overlooked because it's just a small part of a huge overarching story. Disney doesn't get that. Actually, most writers in Hollywood nowadays don't get that. It's okay. You can subtly put things in. You don't have to hammer it over everyone's heads. I'm done talking about this right now, but there were almost 60 scripts. Well, there were 60 scripts. from a TV show that would have kept the Star Wars franchise alive. Actually, I think if they had used, at least tried to use part of George Lucas's sequel trilogy treatment, they could have kept that alive. But no, Disney can't do anything right. All they know how to do is suck a franchise dry, lose a whole bunch of money, launder it back through themselves, and go about their day, hoodwinking you into seeing the next Lilo and Stitch movie, which is it's the same thing again. It's going to make over $1 billion. I almost guarantee you that. But all they're doing is taking IP from a yesteryear when they were great. And they're just milking the last of your pocket change. What do you guys have to say about this? This is Malty from Mouth of Malty. Love to see you guys here. Appreciate you so much. Leave everything down in the comment section below. Please subscribe or just like the video. I don't know. Bye.